Queen's Lead podcast. I'm your host, Amy Singleton, and as a child of the 80s, I'd love to say Queens rule, but they don't. Queens lead. Being a queen means you are worthy to be a leader of people. The guests on our show do exactly that. They are leading the way in their businesses, families, and communities. They're taking their rightful place in the spotlight, leading and inspiring the developing queens in all of us. Welcome to the Queen's Lead podcast. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Queen's Lead podcast. Today, I am honored to be joined by Queen Sarah Noel Wilson. She is the owner of her own company called Sarah Noel Wilson. We were just talking off air about that. Welcome, Sarah.
Thanks, Amy. I've literally never been introduced as a queen, and I'm both uncomfortable and excited. I'm excited and a little uncomfortable by it.
No, you are definitely leading like a queen. So let's get into that. Tell our guests, who is Sarah?
That's such a loaded question,
isn't it?
Mm-hmm. So, the biography, the brief biography of who I am as a person, and I'll lead that into what we do. Yeah. I am in a very intentionally healthy relationship, and I say it that way because it's something that we've worked on. My husband and I, we've been together 15 years, and we do work really hard on being intentional in how we show up with each other. And so I'm just celebrating where we're at. We have a little fur baby, Sally. I am very committed to my family. We have a fairly large family, so I'm a very involved aunt, and I just really believe in practicing and trying to be as curious as I can in all aspects of my life. Some fun facts about me is that during the pandemic, I picked up the accordion, and I now own 8 of them.
Heck yeah!
So that's fun.
I love that. That's fun. Did you play another instrument before?
I played the piano. I played the piano when I was younger, so it was sort of a natural. I mean, kind of. It's not this. Accordions are not sexy. And
I think they are so sexy.
I mean, I'm trying to
bring accordion player I know. I love this.
Okay. Yeah. I mean,
it's a lean-in story for me.
Yeah. It's honestly, I love it. And I love it from a self-care perspective. And maybe we can get into this, but one of the things that will be revealed about me in this conversation, perhaps, is that a month before I started my own company, I was diagnosed with ADHD, in large part because how I was struggling to manage building the company on the side. Okay. And so playing the accordion is this beautiful way for me to focus and have to do multiple things really complexly. And it allows my brain to focus in a way it doesn't. So not only do I think it's fun and like a great conversation topic, but it's just really good for my brain.
That's awesome. I love that. And I love that you say you have an intentionally healthy relationship. My husband and I get that all the time. Like, you guys are couple goals. You make it look so easy. No, we work at that shit. Yeah. Like, we are very intentional about our relationship. Yeah. Number 2 for both of us. So like, we finally feel like we got this figured out. Like, we're going to do it right this time. So
I love that
to you and your spouse.
Well, it's funny because I've never said that before. Normally it'd be like, oh, I have a husband. I was like, well, like we're trying to have a different kind of relationship. We're trying to have a different relationship than we've had before. And that's, it does take work. It is not easy. It can be very difficult. And it can be magical when literally probably the person you should have the safest relationship with.
Yes.
That you do have that safe relationship with, that you are fully supported, that you can say, man, I'm struggling with this, or I'm feeling shame about this, or and that goes into all layers, whether it's professional, whether it's personal, whether it's within, intimacy within the relationship. And so there is this beautiful liberation, I feel like, happens when you can be really intentional about a really safe relationship.
Yeah, it's a whole nother level when you can communicate clearly and not just that superficial, like, you got to communicate to make it work. No, talk about the hard stuff.
Yeah. Like, I'm sitting next to you on the couch right now, and for the last hour I've been ruminating on X, and I realize I just need to say it out loud. And I know it sounds irrational, but this is what I'm thinking about. And I'm worried that you're going to be saying this. And it's like, okay, I got you, honey.
I think I find out most of the time it's all in my own head.
Yeah. Yes.
So tell us how you came. What's your background? Like, where did you come from leading up to? A lot of our listeners are, it's stuck in corporate America or in a 9-to-5 job, thinking about like, I got to get out of here. I want to do my own thing. We have so many more options available, especially since one of the wonderful things, side effects of COVID is like, hold up a minute, we can do life different. So tell me what led up to
I'm here for all of that.
Different life. Me too.
Yeah, I'm all about decentralizing work from our life.
100%.
And that's part of how we're trying to build our company is how do we build it better, like for humans. Okay, so the quick version is my undergraduate degree was in theater performance and theater education, which wasn't teaching theater. Yeah, a little pizzazz, a little flair, but it was using theater as an educational tool. And I moved to Des Moines to chase a boy. It worked out. And I did what every good Des Moines person does. I got a job in insurance. And now keep in mind, I didn't grow up in a corporate family. My mom was a stay-at-home mom for most of my dad was a truck driver. I was a very blue collar union family. So there were things I just didn't even understand.
So much in common. Like, yes. Okay, keep going. I love it.
Well, we'll have you on my show and then I'll get to we'll dig into more of your background. I literally got a job in corporate America because I wanted my nights free and insurance, like nights free to do theater and insurance to be able to protect myself. But like educating and learning had always been some part of my thread, whether it's through high school, through college, that was always a part of a deep value of mine. And so I quickly got exposed to training in the corporate world. But more importantly, I started to become really fascinated with power dynamics and the impact that leaders could have not only on teams and organizations, but the people. And so I went through this period where I did a lot of technical training, but was really fascinated with the more intrapersonal. And then I realized, I remember really vividly, I was in my early 20s and I was given the opportunity to attend some leadership development. And it was facilitated by someone who had never been a manager. And it was a class on management. Yeah. And it became really clear that although they were a great facilitator sharing information, they couldn't answer any questions that were coming up. And what dawned on me then was, if I want to work with leaders, if I want to work with managers, let's be really specific, then I need to manage and I need to understand what that's like. So then I just took a path of, I was trying to take on as many different management and supervisory opportunities as I can. That led me to getting my master's at the same time in leadership development, organizational performance. And, and then my value, my passion outgrew where I was, right? And I got really good, because I'll share this, maybe this will resonate for people who are feeling stuck. We do have way more opportunities now than we maybe thought we did before or felt like we could. And I don't know about your background, but I grew up, my dad worked at his company for 35 plus years. That's what you did. And so everyone around me, you went to a company and you stayed there 20, 25 years and it was so
the pen or the watch,
right.
The 401k,
or you got the pen or you got the, and it never occurred to me that how much more valuable it could be if I actually left. And I had this amazing mentor, Leah, and I remember her sitting me down and just being like, I love you and I wish you could stay here. And you are always going to be viewed as young Sarah, even though you've been here 8.5 years, even though you have your master's, even though you've proven. And she just finally said, your real estate is going to be worth so much more outside of this company. And it was such a gift.
Thank you, Miss Leah.
Right. Yes. Huge props to her. Huge. I mean, just that was such a defining moment. And so where that led me was to an opportunity to lead the leadership development efforts, because that's what I was really passionate about. And just happenstance, I landed with a company that was very human-centric. I landed with leaders who were very much, how do we develop the whole person and not just the role? And so then I got 6.5 years of just some of the most beautiful opportunities to experiment and to try doing development differently and to think about it differently. And then we saw the results of it. And then I became really interested in, well, how do we expand this? And I'd been speaking on the side. I'd been doing little workshops on the side slowly for a number of years. And that was just sort of very slow growing. So when people are listening, going like, well, how do I build my side hustle? I'm like, well, I just started. And I got one event that was a speaking event, and I didn't know how to charge, and I didn't know how to contract, and I was undercharging, and I was doing, my fun story. The first paid client I ever got, I quoted him and I was like, I don't know, like $500 for this all day workshop. That feels like a ton of money because I didn't come from money and I'm still not making a ton of money. So this feels like, and I another person that I want to thank, he came back to me and he said, okay, so they will not even take your proposal seriously if you are not charging at least 2 or 3 times that. So I need you to resubmit it. And I want to let you know that locally people are charging 5, 6 times. And I think you're just as good as them. I know you're starting. And that was like another gift, right? Of man, thank you. And yeah. And then, and then just became really interested in how could I do the work I was doing at this company, ROG, for more companies. And there was always a part of me that was constantly keeping a list of, if I ever built a company, what would I do differently? If I ever built a company, what would I do differently? And so then, here's a fun little background story, right? I was speaking to my husband, it was, I don't know, the fall of 2017. and the timeline just kept shrinking. It was like, oh, in a year I'll go, man. Oh, in 6 months. Like, oh, I think this needs to happen sooner. And he's self-employed too. So it was a huge risk, right? Like I was the breadwinner. I had the insurance. I had the stability, right? Massive risk for us.
That's so scary.
And I remember from a place of fear going, are we ready for this? And I'll never forget what he said. He was just like, I've been ready. I've just been waiting for you. And which again was such a beautiful gift of support.
Isn't that so dynamic that we don't think we have it within us, but our spouse, our mentors, our coworkers are all going, girl, do the thing. Like, you're so great. Do the thing. Yeah.
And and how do we tap into that our own power? I mean, there's lots of reasons why it's difficult for us. And it's not because it's difficult for us. The system wasn't made for us, but that's a conversation for another day.
That's a whole other podcast episode.
And so then we started, and so the company that I own is a leadership coaching and consulting practice, and we are celebrating 5 years today. Officially.
Congratulations. I'm so glad it landed on today.
I was too. I think I may have like subconsciously been like, I can just talk about the company on the day that we're celebrating this. And we're really passionate about how do we help leaders people better. We spend a lot of our work is working with highly technical, highly analytical folks, right? That's usually who's getting promoted. And helping them, to be really great in management, you have to be good at processes and products and policies and people. And if you don't get that one right, the rest of them kind of don't matter. And, one of the things that I recently shared with a client is, you can be very productive, but also very destructive as a company. And we just want to help reduce some of that harm and create just greater safety for everyone to feel good about going into work. So, so that's where we're at. Now we have this incredibly growing team, and it's bigger than me. And we're in this transition as a company too of, that evolution and my evolution. And so it's an exciting time. That was a lot. That's
I love it. No, I just love how you took pieces of your own experience and be like, I know I've asked myself over and over, or said to myself, like, why am I not in charge of this? Why we can do this so much better, but being on the inside of a company, it's like you can't see the forest for the trees, but it's so true. When you're on that inside, you just can't see the need of your people sometimes when you're there. So it takes that outside perspective to really navigate what's best sometimes.
Well, and to add to that, really great point is that it's hard too when how you want to do things fundamentally looks different than everything you've ever experienced or been exposed to. And so there is some risk of, I think that, like that can bring up some doubt of, for us, it's, well, can we build a company where people full-time is only 30 to 32 hours? And even then that's pretty loose because I don't track hours, right? I work more hours, but I'm trying to be like, how do I get down to a healthy 40 most weeks? And maybe some weeks when it's slower, a little bit less. And that it just, that can feel scary too. I'm just like, I think we could do this different and better, but boy, everything I've learned to this point is command and control, or
Hmm.
whatever the case might be. And so, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So are you working with primarily companies or individual people or both?
Both. Yeah. I would say that we are predominantly working with executives and senior level like leaders, either
Hmm.
individually or their teams. We do often partner closely with our fellow HR colleagues to do trainings for all levels, but the majority of the work we're doing are for organizations. We do have individuals who we will work with from a coaching perspective, who are wanting to be, God, there's nothing I love more than somebody going, I'm doing this leadership role and I just want to be better and I just don't want to mess it up. It's like, awesome.
I got you on
Yeah. So
that.
that's where we are now. That said, as we're growing, we are examining, exploring, experimenting with how can we increase our impact? How can we create more avenues where individuals can connect with us and we can work together with them? Because I mean, that's the feedback we've gotten, is like, I really want to be able to learn from you or do the kind of workshops you're doing or to experience this, but my company would never be able to afford you, or they don't value it and they wouldn't bring you in. So
Yeah.
hopefully in a year or two, if you and I were to talk again, we'd be having a very different conversation about just access and
Yeah.
who we're getting to partner with.
I like that. Yeah, there's definitely I love to see people stepping up going, I want to be better. Even if my company's not trying to invest in this, I want to learn more so I can lead better. And
Yeah,
that's really
yeah.
inspiring to hear.
It
It hasn't
it
always
and it
been that
does
way, I don't think.
it does happen. I mean, it
Yeah.
does. It does. It's not the. I don't know. I mean, I don't talk to every single person, but I will say that I get exposed to lots of, like, hundreds and hundreds of leaders every year, and it's not common, but it's not non-existent.
Hmm.
And then we're seeing an increase of it. I think that's part of also people, right? Like, as we as individuals are rethinking the role work plays in our life, I think people who are in those positions of power are starting to ask the same questions of themselves, or realizing, shoot, I actually have to do things differently because people have way more choices than they did before. Maybe it's time for me to care in a different
Yeah, yeah,
way
yeah.
and
It
not
got
take.
started with Glassdoor, but the last few years with
Yeah,
social media, I mean,
yeah,
you have to be an open book. You can't, full transparency is the only way through. You
yeah,
can't hide under your bushel like the secret of that company because it's really crappy to
yeah.
work for. That is
Hmm.
gone. We have to be
Hmm.
true blue, authentically great
Yeah, yeah.
as leaders in our
Yeah, like
businesses, or else,
consistently, at least
yeah,
like more moments, it's like we're all gonna have moments of messing up, but let's
of
have
course.
more moments of being good and great compared to maybe where we are currently.
Yeah, definitely. So tell us a little bit about, you said you came back from a background of blue collar, stay at home mom, same for me. I had at least zero exposure to business ownership, entrepreneurship,
Yes.
starting my own thing.
Yeah,
I mean, mom had an in-home daycare for a while,
right,
but I mean, I don't even think it was never an
right.
LLC or anything. It was just
Sure.
like, give me the
It's
check,
like,
I'll watch your
yeah,
kid.
yeah.
So like, where did that, like, what were
I
some of those
resonate with
initial
that.
challenges when you're like, okay, I'm going to do my own thing. Now what? What's an
How much time
LLC?
do
What's
we
a
have? Right.
business bank account? Like what the heck do I
Yes.
do now?
Got all of that. I
All
mean, I
that.
so like I resonate with all of that because I'm like, yeah, no, my mom totally watched, Neighbor Kids for just like
Yeah.
cash, right? There was no
Right.
insurance, there was
Mm-mm.
no any of
No.
that. I the way I, okay, so lots of challenges. What I would say is that I got into this um being a business owner, not because I wanted to be a business owner, but because I wanted to do the work.
Hmm.
And then quickly figured out that I needed to understand how to run a business.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, finding people who were a couple steps ahead of me were so critical.
Hmm.
I was fortunate to have some really strong mentors and support, whether that's from like, hey, you need to protect your intellectual property. And I'm like, tell me more about intellectual property and what that is and why I should care
Yes.
about it. Um, and so it's been phases of challenges because, yeah, I mean, exactly like you said, I wasn't I'm not a finance person. I wasn't exposed to thinking about revenue and profit and strategy and all of that. Right. Again, my dad was a union guy. He had a pension, and that's all he had to think of, think about.
Yep.
There's obviously challenges with that now, but
daughter of a Teamster right here
yeah,
in front of you, girl. I mean, same life.
Man,
that's funny.
Same person? Did
I
we
know,
just?
right? I don't know.
Did we just become best friends?
That's so funny.
Well, but so you understand, and not only within that, so not only do you have, okay, I'll speak from my experience. So not only were there gaps in my knowledge, but there's also gaps in my confidence, because I never came from money. Yeah. I have a very limited relationship kind of with having any kind of wealth or trying to build wealth, right? Like, and actually that was really uncomfortable for me for a lot of years. Of it was really just so much easier to be like, I'm just going to reinvest in the company, instead of like, well, no, I'm building this and I should get some piece of this, right? And there is I'm not just building this for goodwill. I am building this because I also want some financial security for myself and my colleagues, and right, to support my family and all of that.
Yeah.
It's for people. So everything about running the business I had to learn. I didn't go to business school. As I said, I was a theater major. So theater majors are basically taught you're going to be poor. You're going to be like we didn't talk about 401ks. Like that shit didn't exist in theater. Like,
no way.
I mean, it was just like, be really good in service and retail. Make sure, like, here's how you update your headshots. Like I didn't know any of that. And so I feel like my learning curve has been very steep. Now, that said, I do feel like the last year and a half, things have just started to fire in a really elevated way of moving from being the person doing the work to being the person thinking about the work, to now like, oh, I kind of want to start stepping back from the work a little bit so I can start thinking more strategically, so I can be creative in a different way. But, some initial challenges, I had tons of experience managing teams. What I didn't understand at the time is managing a team in an existing company that had existing processes and structures and policies that were already built. The guardrails were already there. Is very different than building a team from the ground up. Yeah. And so there was a lot I realized I took for granted, that made it easier to manage folks. And so, yeah, I mean, one of my biggest failures, just like, I'll name that as a failure, is when I started to bring on contractors or part-time employees, team members, I did not have the focus, the structure to set them up for success. They were just sort of like, I was the tornado who was just taking work and doing work. And they were just like, how do we make sure she doesn't do too much damage in the process? and so that was, that I would say that's taken a while to really start building structures, and even just like simple things like, how do we store documents? Where do we store it? Because for the first year and previous to that, it was just all me. So it was like, well, this is my system. Yeah. Everything's this right is all here on my computer. Right. Right. Like, but how do we build this in a way? And now that the team has shifted even more, now it's like, how do we create a culture that's more inclusive? How do we create a culture where people aren't deferring to me? Because I don't have the mental capacity to do, I don't have the mental capacity to do the work, think about the work, manage the work, and right, all of that. And so we're all in this kind of beautiful stretch of, no, you literally, I just run with it. If you just want to be like, hey, I'm doing this, you're good. I'll be like, sounds great. Good. Yeah. And, and also just like, even that, and just like, I'm not a negotiator, right? I'm not a salesperson. I'm a very nice white Midwest woman who's very people pleasing and have had to work really hard on that. And, and so learning to charge our worth, being okay with that, being okay that, yeah, I know we're more expensive than other companies in town. We do things different. I don't know what to tell you. Like, this is our market rate. And being comfortable with that, even as a woman too, right? Because we're expected, I think, to really compromise. And then people can get turned off when you don't. And I was like, well, wait a second, you're supposed to make it easy for me, because that's what a woman's supposed to do, is take care of
Yeah.
everything.
Be nice,
Yeah.
smile, be quiet.
Yeah.
Don't be too aggressive or too assertive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
All of that.
All of that.
Yeah, I mean, lots of challenges. And I mean, like, this is going to, maybe for some people listening will feel like a duh moment, but it was an aha moment for us. A business development, for example. Business development, we sort of always looked at, if you can get me on stage at a conference, get me in front of people, we know that we'll probably have like, I don't know, 5 to 8 inquiries come from that. We'll probably land half of those. So realizing that, like, hey, our business development is speaking at conferences. Needless to say, a lot of that, got shut down during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And what I was measuring our health of our company by was financials, because it's easy. But the reality is financials is a delay, it's a lagging marker.
Yeah.
And I was working with a financial coach who's really gracious in his generosity of helping me think through this, Curtis Haney. And he was explaining that. He said, but that's too late. So you need to look at what's driving the revenue. And when we started to break it down, it was like, oh no, yes, being in a conference, for example, in our world is one form of business development. However, it's actually not the most effective business development for us, because only the people in the room, only at that time, gets exposed to it. As opposed to, we need to be creating more content. We need to be submitting more articles. We need to be doing more research. We need to be showing our experience and our expertise. We need to be creating evergreen content that's going to be, there forever. And so instead of going, oh, our goal is to hit this much revenue, like obviously we have financial goals, but now it's, well, how many articles are we submitting? How many longer term posts are we submitting? How many videos are we creating? And that was the health of our company isn't just finances. The health of our company is, and it's not even just prospects, it's what are we doing to fill that pipeline, and how do we prioritize that? Because I think I'm curious to hear your thoughts. It's so easy and it's so seductive, and to just take care of what's right in front of you, the clients right in front of you, the needs that are coming up, and lose sight of, how are we nurturing? How are we building those relationships? How are we deepening our expertise? How are we strengthening ourselves? How are we gathering feedback, right? Like all of those other things that are necessary to be more sustainable and impactful. Because as long as you're just doing what's right in front of you, you can set yourself up for a pretty tough time if those feeds aren't coming in.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the work that we're doing today is not watering the plant here. We're planting an orchard for 6, 8, 12 months, 24 months from now. And like you said, everything that we're doing are planting those seeds, watering and nurturing those seeds for later development, that, when you are just focused on that one thing in front of you and you finish that, well, then what? Where else is that where's that next thing coming from? You've got to have all those seeds planted in various stages of growth in order to maintain the long-term growth. So wise choice. And I don't think that's a dumb moment at all. That's that's a great realization.
It was
it's not something you can realize when it's just yourself though, right? Because no one person can do all that.
Right. No, I don't think so. And if there is a lesson, I mean, a couple lessons I've learned that I've held on to pretty tightly as, I would say, mantras, right? One is, we got to get to version 1. Like, we can't get to version 10 without version 1.
That's right.
Can't be perfect. We just have to start, and we have to trust and know that we will evolve it, we will better it, we will improve it. So that's like one. The second one is we can figure it out.
Yeah.
Right. Kind of everything you can figure out. Someone has figured it out.
Yes.
We're not the first business, but the part for me, is that, our brains are funny. We were talking about this before we hopped on. Our brains are funny things. There were times when the pressure I would put on myself was unnecessarily unrealistic. And I'll show an example of that is, I'm the CEO. I'm the president. I'm the founder. I should know this. I should know how to
Mm-hmm.
do this. I should know how to figure this out. Like, am I going to be able to grow this? Like everyone keeps saying, you're doing such amazing things. And it's like, can I actually be the person to take it to the next level? Am I the person who can accomplish it? And one of the things that I learned through really good therapy also was just the minute I start spiraling, I know I need to reach out to somebody who is a mentor, right? Like I have to interrupt that.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I'm going to be spending so much unnecessary energy and suffering and stress shooting on myself instead of going,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you know what? I don't know that part of finances. So who do I know who can get me that information? And
Mm-hmm.
like being really, I've gotten much better at like doubt, reach out to someone. Doubt, reach out to someone. Because it can
Yeah.
be so easy to, you see other people are like, well, they've got to
No, they don't.
no,
No,
I
they
know they
don't.
don't,
They do not.
know.
Because nobody does. We can't all, I guarantee you, Steve Jobs was not building phones,
Right.
not doing that,
Right.
not
Right.
an expert
Right.
at that. Delegation, especially early on, is so difficult, just to delegate that one thing you're so good at to someone else, but
Yeah.
also to identify the time that like, okay, I am an expert at marketing and branding, but I am not an expert at finances or
Right.
at taxes
Right.
or at,
Right.
whatever else the thing is. Reaching out and being willing to put your money where your doubt is and pay that
Yeah.
person to help you.
Mm.
That's difficult.
Is that a phrase you use? Is this a new phrase? Like
That
put your
literally
money where
just
your
came
doubt is?
out. That
That's
came out.
pretty
I think that's
great.
new. I just coined that.
Great.
Put your
Yeah,
money
that's
where your
good.
doubt is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that. Just float
Yeah.
out. I like it.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
So I loved that your YouTube video, you're kind of like the one on the homepage talks about your Plurpose.
Oh
This is a
yeah.
coin. Speaking of things you've coined, talk
Yeah.
about Plurpose. What's that?
Plurpose. Plurpose was almost the name of the company at one point.
I love it.
I don't remember where this got created. But I wish I could remember the origin story. But at the time, I like, it's funny when I think about that video, because that video is like 5 years old, so I need to update it with who we are now. But that's on
It's
the
a
list
great
to
one.
get to. No, but it's playing with purpose. One of my, I actually I'm drinking out of one of our mugs that says playfully brave, or to be playfully brave, right? It's kind of a play on words. And
Yeah.
and for me, I know that I'm at my best when there's energy and fun behind the work we're doing. But that doesn't mean we don't take it incredibly serious. I mean, we are dealing with, we get my colleague, Dr. Teresa Peterson, we were just talking last night, and she said, it's after a tough conversation, it's like, we have this front row view to humanity in the work we do. We get to see a lot of the hurt and the hard stuff. And, somebody once said about our style, my style is like, I like that it's lighthearted, but it's not lightweight. And so, so for me, it's that, it's not about being silly, although it's okay to be silly. Like, it's good to have moments of silliness. I'm not anti-silly. I'm actually very pro-silly. But like, for me, I want to feel energized and good and have moments of play, and that play can be being creative. That play can be like bouncing ideas off of. That play can also, like, what it's evolved into for me, and when I think of where I'm at now with it, is also being pushed and being uncomfortable and having somebody maybe they're giving you tough feedback. You're like, oh, okay, like, what do I shape differently because of this, and how am I shaped differently because of this? And so, the whole idea of the other thing I will say is that a lot of the work that we end up doing often can be really heavy. So, talking about conflict avoidance and navigating the elephant in the room, sort of inherently raises some emotional heat for a lot of folks. And we found that sometimes having language that's a little bit more playful, again, not lightweight, like we understand, can make it easier for people to hold it, consider it, see it, try it on, right? It can be easier for someone to go, I think I was totally feeding an Imagifit, instead of like, I was completely avoiding that conversation out of fear. Like, people aren't going to say that, but this can be a conduit to get them to have the reflection we need. Like, our words create our reality, but if these words can get you into a room to reflect on, then great. Like, I don't care what door you
Yeah.
take to get into the self-awareness, but what we have found is sometimes it's helpful. Yeah. So that's the Plurpose.
I love the Plurpose. So we are already getting so close on time. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about the book.
Yeah.
Don't Feed the Elephant. Tell us about your book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
I became really fascinated during my graduate studies with the idea of adaptive cultures and adaptive leadership. And I became fascinated particularly with the idea that one of the characteristics of a functional company, high psychologically safe now, was calling the elephant out. And I realized, again, being a Midwest white woman, nice, violently polite is how I like to refer to us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it does, I mean, I laugh at it, but actually it's actually so detrimental. It is so detrimental to our health and our well-being, and it's detrimental to other people's health and well-being. But anyway, so I realized that I had never experienced a relationship or a team that had that kind of candor. I just never had. And I was like, well, they keep writing about it and I keep seeing this. So obviously it can exist. And I just started this journey of how do you actually build that muscle when that's not your norm? That's not how I was raised. And how do you build a team with that? And in the process of just like reading a ton of books and experimenting and trying things with teams, the thing I became fascinated with was even if people had the skills, it was still a struggle. And so I became really interested in the avoidance. And so the book is my love letter to fellow avoiders of conflict, of how do we move from fearful avoidance to starting to have the conversations in a way that can feel good for us and helpful for the others. Because sometimes it's like, well, you just need to say like, that's too big of a leap for some folks, right? Whether it's trauma, whether that's lived experiences, whether that's just our DNA. And so the whole idea of don't feed the elephants is, we talk about the elephant not as a person, but as the elephant's created because of avoidance. Right? Because if you and I were working and you were like, hey, Sarah, can we talk about that meeting? It actually really hurt my feelings when you did X, Y, and Z. The conflict is still there. The disagreement, the hurt is still there, but there's no elephant because you talked to me about it. And so reframing that as the person isn't the elephant, our avoidance of acknowledging or addressing the situation is what creates. So how do we stop giving it peanuts? Right. So that's the whole plan. Again, that's like a good example of Plurpose. So yeah.
No, that's such a great example because we are, it sounds like we were raised very similarly. I used to say, and I highly doubt he listens to this, so I could say it. My father growing up would have rather chewed off his own arm than to have engaged in some kind of conflict. But when it happened, it was explosive, right? Like, I'm not saying like I wasn't in a domestic violence situation, but it was explosive energy when that finally came to a head. And it was all because we were all just avoiding what could have easily been said. Well, not easily been said, but we could have learned to navigate what we needed to say and ask for and communicate effectively. Because now I know better, I can do better. But for me now, conflict it's a little bit exciting because it's an opportunity to grow. When we actually get on the freaking same page about something, then it's like, okay, now we're unstoppable. We just have to have the conversation.
Yes. And that's such a, and that's easier said than done, right? It's easier said than done to be, this is an opportunity for me to build this muscle. It's still really uncomfortable. I still don't know how you're going to react, and maybe you're going to react poorly, or I'm going to react poorly. But the more you do it, the more you know that, man, if we can actually figure this out, this moment of disagreement will make us stronger. We will learn that we can handle the heat together. We will learn that we can push each other. We will learn, going back to the conversation about relationships and safety doesn't always mean comfort, right? Safety means that I can be uncomfortable with you. I can take a risk, but I know that I'm not going to be hurt. I know that I'm not going to be, right? Like, I know I'm going to be safe with you. And it is, there's still times where I go, oh, this conversation, and like, my heart's racing or I'm processing it. But the thing that I often say, and I write this in the book, and often when we're doing work, is it may not get easier. Like, it may not ever be easy, but it can get easier, and And there is something, I mean, similar, very much grew up in a fawn response house, right? Maybe one parent would be explosive and the other parent would just, right, be very demure and never learning that. And I don't say that in any way to blame my folks. Like,
Yeah,
everybody's
exactly.
doing the best they can with what they have, right? There's
That's
lots
right.
of generational differences, perhaps some trauma in there. And, so I give them a ton of grace. And as I'm learning, because part of it is, and I want to be clear, there are times when we may choose to avoid, and that's totally okay. There may be times when we choose to consciously not engage, to go, you know what, it's not worth it. This relationship isn't
Yeah.
worth it to me. This isn't worth the stress. Like I'm out, or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
But in those moments, I think the thing that I see over and over again is that the damage can happen when we avoid big stuff, but the damage can also happen when we're avoiding little stuff. And it's like it's like death by 1,000 cuts. Like, oh,
Yes.
I understand why you don't trust each other, because you have literally avoided, or the two of you have not engaged or had any kind of meaningful interaction around how do we intentionally build this relationship. There haven't been moments of repairing a relationship, which is just an inevitable part of being in community with humans. You're gonna fuck up. Like, I'm sorry to say
Yeah.
that like that, but you
No,
will
say
mess
it.
up.
We're
Like, you
gonna. Yeah.
will. It's not if, it's when. And do we know what to do with that? And how do we recover from that? And and how do we properly apologize? And how do we really take in that feedback? It's none of that is easy, but it is all worth it. It's all worth it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one thing I would say, I mean, same with my parents, they're doing the best they can. But one thing my mother used to say all the time was, they can't eat you. I mean, like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen, really? I mean, are we confident enough? And I had to learn this much later in my life, but am I confident enough as a person to know that no matter what happens outside of me with a relationship, a finite project, whatever's happening, it's the worst thing that can happen.
Yeah.
Oh, I go to prison. Sweet.
Sure.
That's all right. I don't look great in orange, but I'm going to be okay. I'm
Yeah.
not, I'm going to be okay. I'm always
Yeah.
going to be okay.
And I think that, like, that the timing of this conversation is really timely, because it's something I've been working on personally. There's certain situations that can still very much trigger that really strong childlike fawn response of feeling defensive, right? And in my case, like, I'll speak it because we're talking to an audience of women, really assertive, aggressive, and abusive men. It's very triggering for me. And it's something I've been working on with my therapist, because I'm like, I don't like the power I feel like I'm giving those situations, and the way that, and now we're getting into like some processing here, but we're navigating our sort of child defaults that we've learned. Like, you were helpless at times, you were defenseless. And even though I'm a 41-year-old woman who, I know I'm confident, I know it's going to be okay, I know they can't eat me, which I love that. I intellectually, I know all of this, and yet there's some part of my brain that feels very defenseless. And how do we soothe that part of us, right? Not shame it, and just go like, oh yeah, that's like child Sarah coming. That's 5-year-old, 10-year-old Sarah coming out. But like 41-year-old Sarah knows that it's not that I'm not defenseless, actually. And like,
do you talk to her? Because I also 41. I'm telling you, it just keeps happening. Also 41. I've recently, I work with a mindset coach on a weekly basis. And I've recently, because through that work, I've recently started having conversations with Amy. I have conversations with 5-year-old Amy, 10-year-old Amy, 15-year-old Amy, which is really hard to have. And I show her grace, and I show her acceptance, and I speak out loud sometimes in the bathtub with my book or whatever. I'll put it down and be like, I have compassion for you. You didn't know better. You weren't taught better. Now you do know, but it's okay to love every version of yourself, even if that was a failing version or a sad version or depressed version or a version that didn't know what the hell to do with your life. You have to have compassion. I have such bleeding compassion for others. But it's not until just recently that I started having compassion for that loudmouth, drama kid, choir girl, that awkward, loud, obnoxious Amy, who's now getting paid to run this mouth.
Yeah.
You have to have compassion for your former self
Yeah.
and love for others, including old versions of you.
Yeah, I love that. I love that practice, and I love that as a gift for all of us to think about. And it's just been literally in the last couple of days that was the first sort of like separating, because I'd go, wow, why did the situation put me in a spiral in
Mhm.
a way that I don't enjoy.
Yeah.
And I hadn't then another like kind of circumstance come up where I had to set a boundary. And again, when you have been raised to be nice, when you have been raised to take care of other people, when you have been all of that, setting boundaries can be terrifying.
Yeah.
And I did have a conversation. I was like, hey, little, I was like in my head, I goes, we got this. Like,
That's right.
we're good. I got you. Like, 41-year-old Sarah, I've got you. You're going to
Yeah.
be safe. You're going to be fine. Like, we aren't defenseless in this situation.
Mhm.
And I love that as a practice. I get a little misty eyed thinking about it. And I think sometimes I think that's just such an important part, that radical acceptance, right? For
Mhm.
ourselves of, because man, as we're, I said it flippantly, but the world wasn't built for powerful, strong, confident women. It
Mhm.
wasn't. It wasn't built for us, which is part of why imposter syndrome exists. Imposter syndrome often shows up in folks who the system wasn't built for. And we're
Yeah.
cutting new paths, and we're challenging rules, and we're challenging all of that, which means we have to, it's like our whole self is on that journey. And I love that invitation, because I am going to be more intentional about talking to her because of this. So thank you for that. And being okay that, like, yeah, and that initial stress response might never go away. And
Yeah.
that's okay, because that's just survival. Women have
Mhm.
to calculate. We have to calculate things for safety.
Yeah.
Um, all the time, kind of just like even when you're in a safe environment, you're still very like,
Yeah.
I'm very aware that I'm walking to my car and it's late at night and I have to, right, where are my keys, and is my
Yep.
husband on speed dial, and right, like there's just calculations that we make as women. And then then there's another layer when you look at, right, if you look at the intersectionality of a woman of color or somebody who identifies as LGBTQA, or and then there's extra layers to that, and how important it is that we do give ourselves grace. We can give ourselves grace and be really, really confident and powerful that,
Mhm.
like, we can take care of this. And like, in many situations, right, some externals, like, we can't control what other people do, and we can't control
Right.
the systems and structures we're in always, but we can try to control how do we want to show up in this moment. And again, that's easier said than done. I'm not
Yeah.
very much believe in some trauma or like therapy work with this, but
Right.
yeah.
But we don't move forward without practice,
Yeah.
because avoidance does not allow us practice. Avoiding that
Right.
elephant doesn't get us practice. And practice, although, like you said, it may always be, there's always going to be that gut, like, oh, okay, I'm in
Yeah.
this situation. But as we retrain that neural pathway with a different response from now
Yeah.
on, it may never feel easier, but it will get easier as
Yeah.
we repeat that over and
Yeah.
over again.
And
And
the
it's
more
up to
people,
us to do it for other women,
yeah.
to set that
Yeah.
example.
And to build communities around you with people who are also doing the work,
That's right.
whether that's your partner, whether that's your family members, whether that's your friends. Like, I know there's a lot of talk of, right, like your success is the average of the 5 people you're around, and which is, there's probably some truth to that. But for me, it's like my not financial, my physical, my psychological well-being is so impacted because I'm now surrounded by people who are doing the work, who are trying to have
Yeah.
these conversations, who are more comfortable with having these conversations. And then that sometimes we dance in really hard spots, and there's something really beautiful about having, again, people to walk alongside you. And so there's also, for people who are going like, oh, I don't know how to do that, find people who are doing that,
Mm-hmm.
and it will help you be better. God, and it's so worth it. So worth
Yeah.
it. There's so much unnecessary suffering we hold on to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're meant to be in community. And in my
Yeah.
community, I'm always seeking to be the dumbest person in the room. I don't want to know any more than anybody I'm with, because they teach
Yeah.
me so much. I learned so much
Yeah.
from others. So, and I've learned so much from you today.
That's a
So
beautiful ending.
tell our listeners where they can find you. If they have a team or they are a high-level executive or in business and they need some leadership development, where's the best place to connect with you and your team at?
The best place to connect with us is at sarahnollwilson.com, SarahNollwilson. Don't be fooled by the name. We have an incredible crew of amazingly talented folks, and it's growing. Social media, my DMs are always open. I may not always respond super timely, but I will get to it.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
if there is something that comes up, yeah, I would love to connect with folks.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being my guest. Everybody go over, check out Sarah Noll with an Noll Wilson.com and connect with her team that can definitely help you out with some communication, leadership skills, and more. So thank you so much for being my guest. Congratulations on 5 years. And thank you for being a queen that leads.